Hello, friends. All right, since you all already have your flat Mrs. Reeds or your small Mrs. Reeds, I'm going to read the story that those are based off of, and it's called Flat Stanley, and it's by Jeff Brown. He wrote this book, and he also drew the pictures. This is a chapter book, but there is some pictures in it. So, for the next 5 days, Mrs. Reed will be posting a chapter every day that you can listen to until the end of the book. So, we are going to start reading Flat Stanley. The first chapter is called The Big Bulletin Board. And there's the picture. Breakfast was ready. I will go wake up the boys, Mrs. Lambchop said to her husband, George Lambchop. Just then, their younger son, Arthur, called from the bedroom he shared with his brother, Stanley. Hey! Come and look! Hey! Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop were both very much in favor of politeness and careful speech. Hay is for horses, Arthur, not people, Mr. Lambchop said as he entered the bedroom. Try and remember that. Excuse me, Arthur said. But look! He pointed to Stanley's bed. Across it lay the enormous bulletin board that Mr. Lambchop had given the boys a Christmas ago so that they could pin up pictures and messages and maps. It had fallen during the night and on top of Stanley. But Stanley was not hurt. In fact, he would still have been sleeping if he had not been woken up by his brother's shout. What's going on here? He called out carefully from beneath the enormous board. Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop hurried to lift him from the bed. Heavens! Said Mrs. Lambchop. Gosh, said Arthur. Stanley's flat! As a pancake, said Mr. Lambchop. Darnest thing I'd ever seen. Let's all have breakfast, Mrs. Lambchop said. Then Stanley and I will go see Dr. Dan and hear what he has to say. In his office, Dr. Dan examined Stanley all over. How do you feel? He asked. Does it hurt very much? I felt sort of tickly for a while after I got up, Stanley Lambchop said. But I feel fine now. Well, that's mostly how it is with these cases, said Dr. Dan. We'll just have to keep an eye on this young fellow, he said, when he had finished the examination. There's Dr. Dan and Flat Stanley. Sometimes we doctors, despite all our years of training and experience, can only marvel at how little we really do know. Mrs. Lambchop said she thought Stanley's clothes would have to be altered by the tailor now, so Dr. Dan told his nurse to take Stanley's measurements. Mrs. Lambchop wrote them down. Stanley was 4 feet tall, about 4 foot wide, and half an inch thick. The end for chapter 1. Tomorrow when you come back for chapter 2, it is going to be Being Flat is what it's going to be called. So that was chapter 1 of Flat Stanley. See you tomorrow for chapter 2.